I buried my wife with frozen hands. My son's blood had already turned to ice on the floor. My daughter, she was still holding her mother when I found them. The bear didn't just kill them, it tore them apart. It made sure I would see what remained. I know which beast did this. Everyone in Yakutsk knows the legend. The Alpha, the scar-faced giant that rules these frozen mountains. 3.8 meters of muscle, fur, and rage. It has killed men before. Now it has taken everything I love. I don't care if it kills me. I don't care if I freeze to death in the pursuit. I will hunt it. I will find it. And I will make it pay in the only language it understands. I am no longer a man. I am vengeance wrapped in human skin. And I will not stop until I wear the skin of the monster that destroyed my world. My name doesn't matter anymore. What I was, a husband, a father, a man who laughed at dinner tables, died the moment I walked through my door and saw red snow on white wood. I lived in Yakutsk, one of the coldest inhabited places on Earth, where the thermometer sometimes reads -70 degrees Celsius, where metal burns your skin if you touch it without gloves, where breath becomes ice crystals before they reach the ground. We were happy there. My wife made our small house warm. My children, they didn't know that life could be anything but this endless white. They didn't know evil lived in the forests we respected. I was a hunter. I knew the wilderness. I knew the animals. I thought I understood survival. I understood nothing. The moment I found them, something inside me didn't break. It transformed. Grief became a physical thing. A weight that crushed my chest and then hardened into something cold and sharp. My wife's face was frozen in her final expression. My son had tried to fight. My daughter had tried to hide. The bear tracks were still fresh in the snow outside. I knew which bear. Everyone knew. The legend of the mountains. The alpha that other bears feared. The one with scars across its face from battles it had won. Hunters told stories about it in bars, about how it had killed 3 men over the years, how it led a group of females and dominated territories the size of small countries. Now it had come to my home and taken everything. If you like stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Comment on which city you're watching from. Leave a like. And now let's get into the story. I left before sunrise to hunt deer. The cold was brutal that morning, even by Yakutsk standards. -63 degrees. The kind of cold that makes your lungs burn with every breath, where exposed skin dies in minutes. I wore layers of fur, carried my rifle, moved through the white silence like my father taught me. The forest was peaceful. The snow crunched under my boots in that particular way it only does when it's cold enough to turn moisture into powder. I tracked a young buck for 3 hours, moving slowly, patiently, the way you must in this landscape. When I finally took the shot, it was clean. 1 bullet. The deer fell without suffering. I field dressed it quickly, my hands working efficiently despite the cold numbing my fingers through the gloves. I remember feeling satisfied, proud even. We would eat well for weeks. My wife would make that stew my children loved. I thought about their faces as I dragged the carcass back through the snow. Imagined my daughter's smile, my son's excitement at helping me prepare the meat. The walk home took 4 hours. The sun was already setting. It sets early in Siberian winter, casting everything in shades of blue and gray. I saw my house from a distance, the small wooden structure we'd built together. Smoke that should have been rising from the chimney but wasn't. Something in my chest tightened. Walked faster. The deer was heavy, but I abandoned it in the snow 50 meters from my door. I started running. The front door was open. It should never be open in this cold. It means death. I called out. My voice echoed in the frozen air. No one answered. I stepped inside. The silence was wrong. Houses with children are never silent. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the floor, frozen in patterns that told a story I didn't want to read. My wife was near the door, her body torn in ways that made my mind refuse to process what I was seeing. She'd been trying to protect them. I could tell from the way she'd fallen, arms outstretched toward the back room. My son was in the hallway. He'd grabbed the hunting knife we kept by the door. It was still in his small hand. He'd tried to fight. He was 8 years old, and he'd tried to fight a bear. The wounds on his body, I can't describe them. I woke. My daughter was in the corner of their bedroom, partially hidden under blankets. She was 6. She'd tried to hide, like we'd taught her, if there was ever danger. It hadn't mattered. The bear had found her anyway. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Something inside me went completely silent. I stood in that room for what might have been minutes or hours. I don't know. The cold was seeping into the house through the open door, but I didn't feel it. I walked back outside like a puppet with cut strings. The tracks were obvious. Massive bear prints, far larger than normal, spaced wide apart. The creature had approached from the east, from the forest where the alpha was known to roam. It had smashed through our door. The wood was splintered inward. It had killed my family and then left, calm and deliberate, its tracks leading back into the mountains. I followed the tracks with my eyes until they disappeared into the tree line. The sun was almost gone. The temperature was dropping toward -70. I went back inside and looked at my family one last time. Then I closed their eyes, all of them, my hands shaking not from cold, but from something else. Something that was growing inside me, like ice forming on water. Spreading, hardening, replacing everything soft with something that could cut. I gathered supplies that night by lamplight. Food I wouldn't taste, water I wouldn't feel grateful for. Ammunition, my best rifle, the hunting knife my father gave me. I didn't bury them that night. The ground was frozen solid. It would take days to dig graves deep enough. I couldn't wait days. I left them in the house and barred the door to keep scavengers out. I would bury them when I returned. If I returned. I didn't care which. I stepped out into the Siberian night, into cold that could kill me in hours without shelter, and I started walking east, following the tracks. The moon was full, reflecting off the snow, turning the world into a landscape of white and black shadows. I could see the bear's path clearly. It wasn't running. It wasn't afraid. It had killed my family and walked away like it had done nothing more significant than catch a fish. That's when I understood. The bear didn't know what it had done. It was just an animal, acting on instinct, seeing prey and taking it. But I was not just an animal anymore. I was something worse. I was a man with nothing left to lose, and only one purpose remaining. The tracks led into the mountains, where the alpha ruled, where other hunters had disappeared, where legends were born. I followed them into the darkness, my breath freezing in clouds around my face, my heart beating steady and cold. I remember the exact moment I stopped being who I was. It was somewhere between my house and the tree line. The man who left that house was already dead. What walked into those mountains was something else. The Siberian wilderness in deep winter is not a place for humans. We pretend we can survive it, but we're visitors at best, tolerated by a landscape that could erase us without effort. Temperatures that can freeze flesh in minutes. Wind that cuts through any clothing. Darkness that lasts 20 hours a day. I tracked the bear for 3 days before I saw it the first time. 3 days of moving through snow that sometimes reached my waist. 3 days of eating frozen meat and melting snow for water over tiny fires I built in the shelter of rocks. 3 days of sleeping in burrows I dug into snowdrifts, wrapped in every piece of fur I carried, shivering so violently I thought my bones might break. My face was covered in ice from my frozen breath. My hands were numb, despite gloves. My feet had lost feeling after the first day, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Every time exhaustion tried to take me, I saw my daughter's face. Every time the cold tried to convince me to rest, just for a moment, I saw my son with that knife in his hand. Every time my body screamed at me to turn back, I saw my wife's arms outstretched. The bear's tracks were easy to follow at first. Massive prints in fresh snow, heading steadily east and up into higher elevations where the cold was even more brutal. On the second day, I found where it had killed an elk. The carcass was still warm, steam rising from torn flesh. The bear had eaten its fill and left the rest. I was close. The tracks showed it was moving slower now, more casually. It didn't know I was following. Why would it? Bears don't fear humans here. They're apex predators in a landscape where humans are fragile, temporary things. I checked my rifle. Loaded. Ready. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from cold and exhaustion. I forced myself to eat some of the elk meat raw. I needed calories. I needed strength. The meat tasted like nothing. Everything tasted like nothing. On the third day, the weather turned worse. A storm rolled in from the north, bringing winds that screamed through the trees, and snow so thick I could barely see 5 meters ahead. Normal men would have stopped, would have built shelter and waited it out. I kept walking. The tracks were being covered by new snow, but I didn't need them anymore. I knew where the bear was going. There was a valley, deeper in the mountains, a place where geothermal activity kept certain areas slightly warmer. Bears denned there. The alpha would be there, surrounded by its group. I reached the valley as the storm cleared on the 4th day. My body was shutting down. I knew the signs. The numbness spreading, the drowsiness, the way my thoughts were becoming slow and unclear. Hypothermia was taking me. I had maybe hours before I lost the ability to function. I built a fire in a cave overlooking the valley. The warmth was excruciating as feeling returned to my extremities. I forced myself to eat, to drink, to prepare. Below me, in a clearing, partially free of snow, from the warm earth beneath, I saw them. 5 bears, 4 females, smaller, around 2 meters when standing. And him, the alpha. Even from a distance, I could see why it was legendary. It was massive, far larger than any bear should be. Its fur was dark, almost black, scarred in places where old wounds had healed. It moved with the confidence of something that had never lost a fight, that had never needed to fear anything. It was beautiful in the way that terrible things are beautiful. Perfect, powerful, monstrous. I watched it for hours as my body slowly recovered by the fire. Studied how it moved, how it dominated the other bears with simple presence, how it would stand on its hind legs and survey its territory, like a king examining his kingdom. 3.8 meters tall when it stood, maybe 800 kilograms of muscle and claw and teeth. My rifle felt small in my hands. I'd killed bears before, normal bears, 2-meter males that weighed 300 kilograms. You shoot them in the heart or lungs, and they drop. Sometimes they charge first, but if you're quick and accurate, they die before they reach you. But this thing, I'd heard the stories. Bears this size don't always die from single shots. Their muscle mass is too dense, their bones too thick. Wounded, they become more dangerous. Enraged, I had 6 bullets in my rifle. I needed to make them count. As night fell and my fire burned down to coals, I made my decision. I would wait until morning, when the bear was away from the females, when I had clean shooting lines, when I was rested enough to shoot straight. I tried to sleep that night, but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in my house, standing in blood, looking at what remained of everything I loved. I fed the fire and sharpened my knife. The steel scraped against the whetstone with a sound that was almost musical in the frozen silence. I imagined driving it into the bear's heart, again and again, until my arms gave out, until the thing that killed my family understood what it had taken. But bears don't understand revenge. They don't understand loss. They understand dominance and hunger and survival. The alpha had killed my family, not out of malice, but because they were there. Prey. Food. That made it worse somehow. That my wife and children died for no reason beyond being in the wrong place. That their lives meant nothing to the creature that ended them. I sat in that cave and felt the last pieces of my humanity fall away like dead skin. I was becoming something else, something that lived only for one purpose. When morning came, I would hunt the bear, and when I found it, one of us would die. I moved at dawn when the light was gray and uncertain. The bears were still sleeping in a dense cluster at the edge of the clearing, bodies pressed together for warmth despite the geothermal heat. I crept down from my cave position slowly, using rocks and trees for cover, moving when the wind blew to cover any sound. I got within 60 meters before the alpha stirred. It stood, massive even on all fours, and tested the air. I froze. For a moment I thought it had scented me, but the wind was in my favor. It was just waking, stretching the way bears do, shaking snow from its fur. I shouldered my rifle, aimed for the heart. My hands were steady despite everything. I'd made this shot 1,000 times on smaller game. I controlled my breathing, squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle shot shattered the morning silence. The bullet hit exactly where I aimed, center mass, just behind the front leg where the heart should be. The bear roared. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard. Rage and pain combined into something that made my bones vibrate. But it didn't fall. It spun, trying to locate the threat, blood already darkening its fur. I fired again. Another hit, this time in the shoulder. The bear spotted me. Our eyes met across 60 meters of snow. I saw intelligence there, recognition, not of me specifically, but of danger. It charged. 800 kilograms of apex predator, moving at 40 kilometers per hour through snow. It covered the distance in seconds. I fired 3 more times as it charged. I know I hit it at least once more. I saw the impact, saw blood spray, but it didn't slow. At 10 meters, I understood I was going to die. I turned and ran, which was stupid, which was instinct, which was useless. Bears are faster than humans. I made it perhaps 20 steps before it was on me. The impact was like being hit by a car. I flew forward, tumbled, lost my rifle. I tried to get up, but something was wrong with my left leg. Broken or dislocated, pain screaming up into my hip. The bear was on me before I could process the injury. Its paw, the size of a dinner plate, claws like knives, came down on my back. I felt ribs crack. I screamed into the snow. I rolled, somehow, survival instinct overriding pain. Got my knife out. The bear's jaws came for my face. I got my left arm up. It bit down. The pressure was immense. I felt bones breaking, felt teeth grinding together through my flesh. I drove my knife into its neck. Again, stabbing blindly, desperately. The bear released my arm and backed away, shaking its head. My knife was still in its neck. Blood poured from the wound, from my previous shots, pooling in the snow. But it wasn't enough. The bear was wounded, bleeding, but far from dead. It lowered its head and charged again. I crawled backward, my broken body barely responding. The bear batted me aside almost casually. I hit a tree. Something in my chest broke. Blood filled my mouth. The bear stood over me, and I saw my death in its eyes. It raised a paw for the killing blow. I closed my eyes and thought of my family. Then I heard shouting, gunfire. The bear roared and turned away from me. Through blurred vision, I saw figures, other hunters, drawn by my rifle shots. They fired at the bear, hitting it multiple times. The alpha, already wounded, finally retreated. It ran back toward the tree line, limping heavily, leaving a trail of blood. The hunters wanted to pursue. I stopped them. Mine, I managed to say through broken teeth. It's mine. They helped me back to their camp, 3 kilometers away. I had 7 broken ribs, a shattered left arm, a dislocated shoulder, a broken leg, severe lacerations, and frostbite on my face. The hunters, rough men who lived even further from civilization than I did, set my bones without anesthetic. I passed out twice from the pain. They told me the bear was dead, that nothing could survive wounds like that I should count myself lucky to be alive and let it go. I knew they were wrong. I'd seen the intelligence in the bear's eyes. It was hurt, but not dying. Not yet. I stayed with the hunters for 2 weeks while my body began to heal. Broken bones don't set quickly. Every movement was agony. But I refused to leave the mountains. Refused to go back to Yakutsk. What would I return to? An empty house? Graves I still needed to dig? I asked the hunters to take me back to the valley when I could walk again. They refused at first, said I was insane, said the bear would kill me. I waited until they were asleep and left on my own, hobbling through snow on a makeshift crutch, my left arm in a sling, pain radiating from every injury with each step. I made it 5 kilometers before they found me and dragged me back. "You want to die," one of them said. "No," I told him. "I want to kill." They understood that at least. 1 week later, still badly injured, but mobile enough to move, I went back. The hunters gave me a new rifle and more ammunition. They didn't try to stop me this time. They just watched as I limped back toward the valley, toward the Alpha's territory. I found the bear 3 days later. It had survived its wounds, just as I knew it would. It was resting in a small ravine, healing, its group scattered. When it saw me, it stood. We regarded each other across 30 meters of frozen ground. It charged. I was slower this time, injured, unable to run. I got off 2 shots before it reached me. Both hit. Neither stopped it. It knocked me down, and its jaws closed around my right shoulder. I felt my collarbone snap. I drove my knife into its eye. The bear released me, roaring, head thrashing. I stabbed it again, this time in the throat. It backed away, blood pouring from its throat, its ruined eye. It wanted to kill me. I could see it. But it was wounded too badly now. It retreated again, limping, bleeding, but alive. Still alive. I collapsed in the snow, my blood mixing with the bear's. 2 hunters found me, hours later, unconscious and nearly frozen. They carried me back, told me I had to stop, that the bear had won, that I needed to heal properly or I would die. I healed, and when I could walk without a crutch, I went back again. 6 weeks after the first encounter, I returned to the mountains for the 3rd time. My body was still broken. My left arm would never fully heal. The bones had set wrong. My ribs ached with every breath. I walked with a limp from the leg injury, but I could move. I could hunt. I'd spent the weeks between plotting, learning, understanding. I fought the bear like a human, using guns and distance. The bear had won those fights because it was stronger, faster, more durable. It could take bullets and keep fighting. It could break bones and keep charging. I needed a different approach. I studied wolves. They hunt things larger than themselves by exhausting their prey, by attacking, retreating, attacking again, bleeding the target slowly, never giving it rest, never allowing recovery. I would hunt the bear the way wolves hunt moose. I returned to the valley with supplies for a long hunt. I built a camp in the same cave I'd used before. Then I started tracking. The alpha had moved its territory slightly west, away from where the previous fights had occurred. It was being cautious now. It knew I was dangerous. That was good. Fear would make it reactive. The group was smaller. Only 2 females remained. The bear itself was still healing. I could see it in how it moved, favoring its left side where my bullets had struck, where my knife had carved into muscle. I started the harassment on the first night. I waited until the bears were sleeping, and then fired a single shot into the ground near them. Not trying to hit anything, just noise, disruption. The bears scattered. The alpha searched for me, but I was already gone, moved to a different position. The next day, I did it again, and the next night. And the day after that, I never stayed in one place. I never gave it a chance to locate me properly. I was a ghost in the forest, a persistent threat that wouldn't go away. After a week, the females left. They weren't bonded to the alpha strongly enough to endure constant harassment. The alpha was alone now. I watched it grow more agitated. It wasn't sleeping properly. It was constantly alert, constantly searching. Good. I increased the pressure. I left my scent on trees near its den. I destroyed a cache of food it had stored. I fired shots in the night from different directions. I gave it no peace, no rest. I was becoming part of the landscape, a predator as patient and relentless as winter itself. The bear began to deteriorate, not from wounds, those had healed, but from stress, lack of sleep, constant vigilance. It was losing weight. Its movements became more erratic, more desperate. I'd learned something about myself during those weeks. I didn't sleep much either. I didn't need to. Something had changed in my brain. The parts that needed rest, that needed comfort, they were gone. I could exist in the cold indefinitely, could go days without eating, could push my broken body beyond what should have been possible. Grief had remade me into something harder than the frozen ground. On the 15th day, I decided it was time. The bear was weakened enough, exhausted enough. I picked my location carefully. A narrow ravine where the bear would have limited mobility, where it couldn't use its size advantage effectively. I built a trap, simple but effective. Sharpened stakes hidden under snow at the ravine's narrowest point. Then I positioned myself at the other end and waited. At dawn, I fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The bear, conditioned now to associate gunfire with my presence, charged toward the sound, toward me. It ran into the ravine because I gave it no other choice. I was positioned so that coming straight at me was its only option. It hit the stakes at full speed. I heard them punch through the pads of its feet, saw it stumble. Not a killing blow, but painful, disorienting. It roared and kept coming, limping now, bleeding from its feet. I emptied my rifle into its chest. 5 shots, all hits, center mass. The bear slowed, but didn't stop. I dropped the rifle and drew my knife. The bear was 6 meters away, then 3, then it was on me. I didn't try to dodge. I moved into the attack, under its reaching paws, inside its range. My knife found its throat. I drove the blade in and dragged it sideways, opening the major artery. Blood sprayed across my face. The bear's paw hit my chest, breaking more ribs, but weakly. It was dying. Finally, I stabbed it again, in the chest, searching for the heart. The blade scraped against ribs. I angled up and punched through, found the heart. twisted the knife. The bear's roar became a gurgle. It collapsed sideways. I was pinned under it, unable to breathe, ribs grinding. The weight was crushing. I thought I might die there, trapped under the beast. But the bear shuddered once and went still. Dead. Finally dead. I lay under the bear's corpse for what might have been minutes or hours. Eventually, I managed to work myself free, pushing against dead weight, dragging my broken body out, inch by inch. I stood, barely, and looked at what I'd killed. The Alpha, the legend, the beast that had destroyed my world. It looked smaller in death, just an animal. Old scars covered its body. It had been fighting its entire life. Fighting other bears, fighting wolves, fighting the harsh environment, fighting to survive in a landscape that killed most things. And now it was dead because it had walked into my house and killed my family. I sat down in the snow next to its body. I was bleeding from new wounds. My chest made crackling sounds when I breathed. I probably had internal injuries. I should have felt triumph, victory, something. I felt nothing. The bear's eyes were open, glazed, staring at nothing. I closed them. I don't know why. Respect, maybe? Or just habit. I'd closed my family's eyes the same way. I pulled out my skinning knife and began the work. It took hours. The bear's hide was thick, tough, required careful cuts to preserve. My hands cramped. My broken body protested every movement. But I continued. I'd done this work 1,000 times on smaller animals. This was just bigger, much bigger. The hide weighed at least 60 kilograms. I scraped it as well as I could with the tools I had. It would need proper treatment to preserve it, but that would come later. When I was finished, I wrapped the bearskin around my shoulders. It was massive, covering me completely, still warm from the body. I stood and looked at my reflection in a patch of ice. I was unrecognizable, covered in blood. Mine and the bear's mixed together. Face frozen and scarred. Eyes that didn't look human anymore. Wrapped in the skin of the beast I'd killed. I looked like something from the old stories. A creature of the frozen north. A monster wearing another monster's flesh. I started the long walk back to civilization. It took 3 days. I didn't hurry. I had nowhere to go. Nothing waiting for me. Other hunters saw me from a distance and avoided me. I must have looked like something that death had rejected. When I finally reached Yakutsk, people stared, whispered, moved away. I went to my house. The door was still barred. My family's bodies were frozen solid inside, preserved by the cold. I spent a week digging graves. The ground was frozen so hard, I had to build fires to soften the earth. Then dig while it was still warm. Then build more fires. It was the hardest physical labor of my life. I buried them on a hill overlooking the valley. I carved their names into stones. I said words that meant nothing. Then I went back to my empty house. I live there still. I hung the bearskin on my wall. Sometimes I take it down and wear it. It fits perfectly now. I've lost so much weight that the massive hide drapes over me like it was made for me. I tell myself the hunt was necessary, that I had to avenge them, that any father, any husband would have done the same. But that's a lie. The bear didn't know what it had done. It was just an animal, acting on instinct. I killed it anyway, because killing it was all I had left. Because without the hunt, without the mission, I would have put my rifle in my mouth and joined my family. The hunt kept me alive, but it didn't bring them back. I know that now. I knew it then, really. I just couldn't stop. The thing about revenge is that it promises completion. It whispers that once you've made them pay, once justice is done, the pain will end. You'll have closure, peace. It's a lie. I killed the bear and nothing changed. My family is still dead. My house is still empty. I still see their faces every night when I close my eyes. The pain didn't go away. It didn't even lessen. All I did was kill an animal and break my body and prove that I could be more monstrous than the monster. That I could survive in places that should kill humans. That I could track and hunt and kill something that had killed dozens. None of it mattered. Sometimes I sit by their graves, wearing the bearskin, and try to feel something. Anything. Pride that I avenged them. Satisfaction that the bear is dead. Even grief would be welcome. But there's just nothing. I'm as empty as the winter sky, as cold as the ground they're buried in. I survived the bear. I survived the wilderness. I survived everything except the silence that came after. They call me the bear man now in the villages. They tell stories about the hunter who killed the alpha and wore its skin. They make me sound brave, heroic. They don't understand. I'm not a man anymore. I'm not anything. I'm just what's left when revenge burns through everything else and finds there was nothing underneath worth saving. The bear skin hangs on my wall like a trophy. But it's not a prize. It's a reminder. I proved I could kill the thing that killed them. I proved vengeance was possible. I proved nothing that matters. My family is still dead, and I am still here, empty, cold, wearing the skin of a beast because I couldn't find a way to be human again. Sometimes I think about going back into the mountains, keeping the bearskin on, never coming back, becoming the legend myself, the monster in the woods that hunters tell stories about. It would be easier than this, than living in a house that echoes, than walking past closed doors I can't open, than eating meals for one at a table built for four. The bear killed my family. I killed the bear, and in the end, we both lost. Because the only thing revenge gave me was the knowledge that it changes nothing. That justice is just another word for continuing to breathe when breathing is the last thing you want to do. I wear the bear's skin sometimes and remember when I thought killing it would fix something, would heal something, would matter. I was wrong, but I wear it anyway because it's all I have left of the man I used to be. The man who still believed that monsters could be defeated, that wrongs could be made right, that death could be answered with death, and somehow balance would be restored. The mountains are silent in winter. The cold is absolute. The darkness lasts 20 hours a day, and I am still here, empty as the valley where the alpha died, cold as the blood that froze in my house, dark as the moment I realized revenge had given me nothing except the rest of my life to understand it was pointless. The bearskin weighs 60 kilograms, but it's the lightest thing I carry.